This movie was awesome. Wow. Okay, so When a Stranger Calls from 1979. I had heard the title, but I knew virtually nothing about the movie. Now, with a title like When a Stranger Calls as a horror movie, especially as a horror fan, knowing a lot of tropes, especially knowing that this movie came out in 1979, shortly after an infamous horror classic that played a cliche or started a cliche of the infamous creepy phone call. When I read the very brief like plot summary before I watched it, because I usually try and watch a trailer and then also, read like the little one sentence long synopsis where a babysitter is watching over kids and she starts getting strange phone calls. I was like, okay, this seems like a pretty basic and, probably by the numbers, somewhat insignificant slasher movie, I guess. But no, it is not a Halloween clone at all. This movie is 95 minutes of awesomeness. All right. And the first thing I want to say, I love Psycho. The great thing about Psycho is it's pretty much two movies in one. You've got a horror movie, but also you've got like a mystery movie, right? Because you got the horror movie when you got Norman Bates, being the killer that he is, killing, Janet Leigh. But then at the same time, you've also got the investigators, her family, looking for the car full of money and trying to track her down, right? Yes. With this movie, the first 20 minutes are a intriguing, tense, creepy horror film. And I will say, the one thing that I love about this movie is the music is amazing. The music is so good, and it's iconic. I have heard this music before. This movie does have a remake, so obviously it's not some sort of indie movie, right? It's not Alice, Sweet Alice. It's a movie with decent recognition, right? I believe it made like 15 times its budget at the box office. So, I mean, it was a fairly successful movie. But I love the soundtrack. All right, not the soundtrack, but the score, especially whenever there's like some intensity or like something creepy going on. And because the first 20 minutes is really engaging, it's a really, I don't know, I just like it, right? It's exactly what it sounds like. A babysitter is in the house by herself. She gets phantom phone calls. They end up coming from the house circa Black Christmas, similar to Halloween in some aspects, although Michael wasn't calling from the house. You get what I mean. And there's actually children that get killed, which is kind of crazy. Kind of crazy. You don't actually get to see it, but it's wild because it goes from this stalker, babysitter, murder, slasher for the first 20 minutes, and then it cuts over into like a thriller, cop chasing bad guy murderer movie, right? And then it transitions again. So the movie is 95 minutes, but it's bookended by these really suspenseful, very well done and very well executed, like stalking babysitter, stranger in the house sequences, right? Because the first 20 minutes are amazing. They're just, yeah, I don't know, I'm running out of adjectives. And then the last, I would say 10 to 15 minutes is the same kind of deal. And it actually, I love how the babysitter at the very beginning, you fast forward 7 years, she has her own family, and the same thing pretty much happens again. It's really, really, I love it. So needless to say, if you were to look at this movie in three parts, I love the first part, I love the third part as well. The middle ground, I gotta admit, I enjoyed it. All right, we learn about the killer from the beginning. His name, I believe, is Harry Duncan. He's a British fellow, and the actor who portrayed him did a fantastic job. He's got this like innocent, but also like really troubled and like kind of, I don't know, you almost kind of feel bad for him. It's weird. Like he's innocent, but also you know that he killed these two children out of nowhere for no fucking reason with his bare hands. Like they talk about it. It's crazy, you know, because he gets caught, they sentence him, they declare him insane, they send him to a mental hospital. He breaks out 7 years later. And, you know, you've got the investigator who was involved in the original case, and he's trying to track him down. He's trying to murder him. And, like, you know, there's that infamous scene at the bar. I don't want to say infamous, but, you know, the bar scene where he gets the shit kicked out of him. It kind of reminds me of, oh, jeez, what's that? It kind of reminds me of the scene from Dexter, where Arthur Mitchell gets the shit kicked out of him by this guy, right? And then he just kind of gets back up. You see the villain who is killing people get beat mercifully. I don't know. For me, there's some sort of odd, I don't know if it's a sensation, but it reminded me of that. Because he gets beat to a fucking pulp in this bar. Like, this dude goes nuts, bro. It's insane. Like, it's kind of crazy, because he's like stalking on this girl or this woman who looks like the precursor to Stifler. She looks like a straight up mature mid to late 40s MILF. Let me tell you. And this movie came out in 1979, right? Like, so this is over 40 years old. But God, there's so much I like about this movie. I really like this movie a lot. But yeah, no, the middle portion, you know, we got our boy, I forget what the detective's name is, but I mean, it's like a goose chase back and forth. There's not really much horror that goes on, you know, in that middle portion where, you know, it's the private investigator tracking down our killer, Mr. Duncan. But, you know, there are some pretty intense scenes, you know, where he's stalking the woman he met at the bar, sneaks in her apartment, so on and so forth. And I got to admit, you know, he is a very interesting character. He's a very, very, I don't know. I really enjoyed the antagonist in When a Stranger Calls. Just like I said, there's just something about him. He kind of looks like James Caan. When I first saw him, he looked just like, it was like, bro, is this the guy from Misery? Like, what the hell? Is this Paul, I almost said Paul Walker. I forget his name. You know what I'm talking about, the author of Misery. But yeah, he did a fantastic job. The performances throughout the movie are pretty good. I would say the lead female actress in the beginning is a little choppy, but I don't know. I feel like that's kind of nitpicking. But no, this was really good. This was a lot better than I was expecting. You know, I'm not gonna lie. The first 20 minutes, I was a little enthralled. I was like, what? Like, this movie is progressing so fast. Like, within the first 3 minutes, like, she's already getting phantom phone calls. And I'm like, dude, what the fuck? Like, because when I read the brief 2-sentence summary, that's all it talked about. It pretty much just ran down the first 20 minutes. But, I mean, you know, the score is awesome. The villain, obviously, he's not your traditional slasher character. He's not overly menacing. He's not killing people 24/7. He's kind of this really deranged, fucked up, you know, mentally unstable guy who, you know, you see throughout the movie in like a real vulnerable state. You know, he's walking around downtown. I actually don't remember the city, but he's walking around the city asking people for money. You know, he's sleeping at homeless shelters, begging, panhandling, and you know, it's, I haven't actually seen Maniac or Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, but I feel like I get those vibes, and maybe I'm completely off on those movies, but yeah, When a Stranger Calls, I really liked it. You know, it was way more than what was meeting my eye at first. Absolutely. I would recommend this to a friend. I would recommend this to a horror fan. I would recommend this to a casual. I absolutely would. Is it a horror movie? I would say yes, because, you know, it's 95 minutes long. About a half hour of it is horror, the beginning and the end. And there's about an hour in the middle where, once again, it's kind of a detective chasing bad guy. But I think that's what makes it unique. I think it stands out. You know, it came out right after Halloween, so I'm not gonna lie. Going into it, I was kind of pigeonholing it into, you know, maybe it's just an exceptional slasher film that happened to get a remake in the mid-2000s, but no, it's really good. I'm gonna give it a 4.5 out of 5. Yeah, I don't. What kind of issues do I have with it though? You know, I don't know. 5 out of 5 just seems like classic territory, but I guess maybe if we could have seen a little more violence, because you don't actually get to see any killing throughout really any of the movie. You do see some flashbacks of like some blood, but there's really not much violence. But that's not always necessary. You know, sometimes the implied violence and the implied, you know, grotesquity, that's not a word. But sometimes that's just as effective. And I think it is, but there's not a whole lot of violence. There's not a very big body count, but nonetheless, 4.5 out of 5. It is a fantastic movie. And I certainly recommend it. A diamond in the rough.